Hello, this is Virtualis the Chess Noob, learning and having fun with chess. So what is the Jaenisch Gambit? Well, it's a surprisingly good response to the Ruy Lopez, which you might know as e4, e5, knight f3, knight c6, and then the Ruy Lopez bishop to b5, immediately attacking the knight. Now, I've traditionally played the Berlin defense, which is developing the other night, but recently have discovered f5, which is the Jaenisch Gambit. Looks almost a bit like a reverse Vienna Gambit, which of course I love playing as white. And the very interesting thing here is, according to the Lichess community database of a little bit over 3 million games, this response, f5, is the only response where black actually has an advantage over white in terms of wins. So black wins a little bit over 50% of the time. In pretty much every other response, white has the win advantage. So that's really interesting. And more than that, the person who plays the Ruy Lopez will not see this very commonly. So this occurred in less than 1% of Ruy Lopez games, which is really quite extraordinary as potentially quite a good response. So before we move on, let's have a quick look now at the review. There we go. This is chess.com's algorithm. And in this game, you'll see reasonably stable in the opening. Opponent sort of gets a little bit of a lead. And then there's this very, very interesting section here in the middle game where we bounce up and down. And this was a fairly tricky position here, where pretty much my opponent and myself made 7, so mutually together, 7 consecutive bad moves. So bad moves or blunders. And luckily for me, the last bad move was made by my opponent and not by myself. Let's go back now to the analysis and continue the position. So in this position, there are a couple of important ideas. Now, if the opponent accepts the gambit, so pawn captures pawn, then just like in the Vienna Gambit, you would push forward the e-pawn, attacking the knight, and now the knight has a problem. There are no particularly good places for it to go. So exactly like the Vienna Gambit. Now, if now in this game, the opponent didn't accept the gambit, so they declined the gambit. Now, if they decline the gambit, the goal is to capture. So firstly, it does, provide a threat to the opponent's knight, but now you've also opened up that F file, and after short castles or kingside castling, the knight, the rook now has a command of that semi-open file, which is potentially very, very good. And that was in fact the case in this game. So in this game, my opponent played d3, which is actually a very good response to the Jaenisch. You can see, so plus 0.4. So the Jaenisch is a gambit. The opponent does potentially come out ahead. And I knew enough of the theories, but I have to admit, still pretty much a beginner in this opening. And of the small handful of games I played, I've actually lost most of them, but I'm starting to get a sense now of what to do. So captures, so semi-open F file, potentially the rook now has command of that file. Captures back, and now develop the other knight, knight f6. Opponent now develops their other knight, and here bishop b4, pinning that knight. And from this point, my next move is a mistake. So here the idea with one of the ideas with the Jaenisch, particularly given that you're kind of one step behind white got to go first, is you need to suppress the initiative. And so bishop captures knight, forcing a damage of their pawn structure is actually an important next move. Otherwise, white potentially captures the initiative. So they did a short castles. So here, as you can see, Stockfish says, I needed to have attacked. I was a bit circumspect on that. The knight, of course, is now no longer pinned. I thought I'll attack the bishop, but that doesn't work because they can capture, and as you can see, +2. So that was a mistake on my part. Capture back. They now capture my pawn. Potentially that sort of knight sort of infiltrating potentially into my territory. Here I decide to capture their knight. They capture back. I short castles, and of course that rook now potentially has control of the semi-open f-file. And my opponent here makes their first serious mistake, their first blunder. So minus 2.8. And pushing a pawn that's sort of defending your king is always potentially tactically unsound. It's a high risk thing. I can sort of see where they're getting at here, but this was probably a very unsound attack. And I suspect in terms of how this game progressed, this is kind of the beginning of a cascading series that just straight up becomes a target. Here, the interesting thing is, in the series of positions, Stockfish didn't like what either my opponent or myself played. And they reckons that in the next set of moves that there's 7 consecutive bad moves, mistakes or blunders consecutively between the two of us. I thought that sort of made sense, and each of these moves kind of going to make sense because, it's a hanging pawn, but, Stockfish didn't like it. Fianchettoing the bishop to sort of develops kind of makes sense, especially given there's a potential sort of discovered attack there. But again, Stockfish hates it. Here I play Queen h4. I thought this was a very clever move, but again, Stockfish didn't like it. They wanted me to attack the knight immediately. But here now I have 3 attackers on that weak f2 pawn, so capitalizing on that open f-file. And I thought that was, tactically very sound, but, very interesting with Stockfish here. Queen move, defending the pawn, attacking the knight. Again, logically that seems to make sense, but again, Stockfish hates it. And now I thought I didn't want to move that knight yet, so defend with the pawn. Again, Stockfish completely hates this. It's really, really interesting because each of these moves seem to make a lot of sense. And now my opponent makes the final bad move, with an attack on the queen, and that is now a mistake because there is now no defender to that g4 pawn. As I said before, that moving of that pawn in front of the king created a target, and now capture with check. So really, really problematic. King has only 1 move. Potentially, there's a check here as well. So that's potentially a very forcing move, maybe trading one of these pieces. But before that, that knight is just toast, because unless they want to lose a queen for a rook, which even comes with check, it's looking really bad for the opponent. So that's a straight up loss of a piece. Move a pawn forward, which is fine, but doesn't really achieve anything. Now I've got that. I thought that was actually a really good move, because that's a very forcing move, because I'm 1 piece ahead. I was just interested in trading pieces. So the opponent must now capture, and so I can capture back. And again, logically, that would be a capture, but capture back with bishop. There we go. And now, finally, I can force the final trade. And so we will now, I should end up with rook and bishop versus 1 bishop. Furthermore, opposite color bishops, which gives advantage to the side which is attacking, because obviously the bishops are basically parallel to each other. They can't defend against whatever the bishop is attacking. Captures, and here my opponent opted to resign. So good game, GG. There are 2 big takeaways here. 1, the Jaenisch Gambit is a sharp response to the Ruy Lopez and worth learning. And 2, it is often tactically unsound to push a pawn that's defending your king. I hope you found this video interesting, and thanks for watching.